If you follow the channel for a while, you know that I make a lot of kimchi. Usually out of stuff I find in my backyard. But what do you do if you've got too much kimchi? The answer is kimchi stew, also called kimchi jjigae. There's a wonderful recipe, several wonderful recipes by Mangshi, Our Lady of Korean Cooking, and everyone's auntie. So I started with Auntie Mangshi's recipe for Korean stew, and I made a few tweaks. So I'm going to take you along with me and give you some ideas on how to make your own version of kimchi stew. Okay, here's what you're going to need to make your kimchi stew. You need kimchi. This is the remains of the carrot kimchi I made a while ago. Some pork belly or pork shoulder cut into small pieces like lardons, and an onion. You're also going to need some kind of liquid. Auntie Mangshi uses an anchovy and kelp broth, but I have pork stock. These two pork stocks were made out of ribs. This one was made out of ham. I've got a video about how to make pork stock in the channel, link in the description. You'll also want some tofu. Auntie Mangshi says that it is optional, but I disagree. I think it really adds a lot to the dish. Medium, firm, extra firm, somewhere in there. You're going to want your Korean red pepper flakes and red pepper paste, a little bit of ginger, a little bit of sesame oil. Let's go. Oh, by the way, if you're a pescatarian, then switch the pork shoulder for tuna, and switch these for either vegetable stock or fish stock. You can also just use water, but that's boring. Now, if you're vegetarian, obviously just leave all of the meat out. Instead of a meat stock, use vegetable stock, and definitely include the tofu. Now, we're going to start with where my recipe diverges from Auntie Mangshi's. To start with, I cook the pork. Now, her recipe calls for you to just toss this into the stew, which works, but I think it is better to cook it. I've got some bacon grease here. You can also use vegetable oil or just toss it on in, but I think that having a little bit of animal fat to get things started really helps with the sauteing process. Okay, I'm gonna let this bacon grease render down a little bit, let the pot heat up, and then we'll get going. Got that bacon grease melted, so we're tossing in the pork belly. Now the main point here is going to be try and render the fat and get some color on the pieces here. At this point, don't worry about getting it 100% cooked through. All of this pork is going to cook up in the stew as well. We're trying to, as I said, get some color and render off a bit of the fat. As for the amount of pork belly to use, it's kind of an individual decision. Mangshi's recipe calls for about half a pound. This is somewhere between half a pound and full pound. If you like your stew extra meaty, use more. If you just like a little hint of the meaty in your stew, use less. So simmer on medium heat until things look partially cooked. You got some golden brown and some of the fat's rendered off. This is not an exact science here because you don't need to get it cooked all the way through. You're trying to, like I said, just give it some color and flavor. Probably cook for about 10 minutes or until they are at a stage of doneness that looks good to you. When they look good to you, take a slotted spoon and transfer them into another container, like perhaps where you're going to cook your actual stew. And then we'll go on to the next step. Be sure that you leave all of the fat and the fond in there. We're going to have a use for it in just a moment. All right, that's where we are right now. Next step, again, medium heat. Take your onions, drop it in with all that lovely fat. And we're going to deglaze with just a little bit of sake. Take all the sake. Use all the sake. Hopefully you'll have more sake than I do. The idea here is we cook the onions till they are semi-translucent. Again, you don't have to worry about getting them perfectly cooked all the way through. We want some color. We want them to absorb some of this nice pork flavor and help us get some of the fond off the bottom here.
If she's going to be crap on camera, then there's enough sake that you can smell it. It works.
It does smell fantastic. The sake and onions are just a match made in heaven. Wish I could send you the smell over YouTube because the smell is fantastic. Here, we're getting some of the moisture out of the onions, some of that excess water out, as well as giving them color and flavor that's really going to make the kimchi stew wonderful. If I had more sake, I would do a better job deglazing this, but don't worry, it's fine. Alright, if you make sure that the moisture runs off, we're going to let these consider their future for the moment and switch over to the stew. Alright, for the stew, I'm going to toss in kimchi. I don't have a measurement for this right now because the measurement is the amount of kimchi that I have not used up and thus wish to turn into stew. A lot of this, once you've made kimchi stew a few times, you can just go by feeling. You'll figure out what proportion of meat and other ingredients looks good to you, what kind of flavor combination feels good to you, and go with that. I'm going to start with one of my pale barbecue pork broths. So for a kimchi stew, you want it to really be a stew, not too dense. And so kind of going by feeling here and guesstimating, I think I'm going to want 1 more pint here. And I'm going to go with my darker broth here, because why not? A lot of this will cook off. I'm going to turn on low, let it simmer, let the flavors get to know each other. So I can always add more liquid later. Right now it's a little soupy, but as I add more solid stuff, like the tofu and the onions, that'll work itself out. I'm going to eyeball all this. Auntie Mangchi says about a teaspoon of sesame oil, a couple teaspoons of sugar, a couple teaspoons of red Korean chili flakes, and about a teaspoon of Korean red chili paste. And we're gonna give these a stir, let the flavors get to know each other. I can see how this, if it's a soup, then it's a very thick soup. It's gonna cook down nicely. Declare my onions done here. Add them on into the stew. All right, last ingredient. Gonna add the tofu. Cut it up to a comfortable for you size. Some people like bigger pieces, some people like smaller. I don't sweat about it too much because I find that when I'm actually eating this stew, it's really easy to just cut up a small piece of cooked tofu with my spoon. Everything a nice gentle stir here. And then we're gonna let all of this simmer for about 20 or 30 minutes, or honestly, however you feel like it. As long as you feel like it. It's one of those things, you can't really overcook it. Cook it, let it simmer until, to make sure that the tofu and all of the other ingredients finish cooking. And then we'll give it a taste. Like I said, 20 to 30 minutes. All right, just starting to bubble. Give it a stir every now and then, but really this is the point. You just kind of let it be. All right, so I went and had some meetings, and this has been simmering for about an hour now, and smells amazing. Some of the liquid has burned off, so I'm gonna turn off the stove, put some in a bowl, and give it a taste. All right, look at this. You can see some of the oil on top. You see it's got some great liquid to it. All of the, you can easily have a spoonful of all of the ingredients in one spoon. Now this stew is absolutely wonderful with rice or noodles to soak up some of the broth here. All right, taste test. It's like a spicy hug. It's really wonderful. Absolute and total comfort food that is meaty and subtle. You can make it spicier or less spicy as you choose. It's such a versatile dish. You can make it pescatarian. You can make it vegetarian. You can make it as meaty or not as you want. You can make it as thick or as thin as you want. And it is a great way to use up homemade kimchi. Or store-bought kimchi, whichever you like. But since kimchi is so easy to make, why wouldn't you do it yourself? And I've included a link to Mangchi's recipe in the description. Go check her out. She's amazing. And then come back here after you've tried hers and think about how you might want to adapt it to your tastes. That's one of the great things about cooking, is that you can make it your way. I hope you enjoyed this video here on Make Mend Grow with Diana. If you enjoyed this content, please like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon. It really helps out the channel. And tell me about your kimchi experiments. I want to know. Bye now.
All right, B-roll.